We'll talk a little bit about chronic disease and go into some nutrition and tips, thinking about making our food last a little bit longer, thinking about serving sizes and reading a nutrition label. And then, of course, we'll go into some resources. We know that those are an important piece of the puzzle to figure out, what research is out there, what resources are out there for learning and continued growth and engagement to live, a healthy life as we all age together. And then, of course, we'll answer any questions that might come up. And we're excited to just get started and engage with you all today. And
Great.
then
Go ahead.
I'll quickly introduce myself. So my name is Whitney Ashhead. I work as the Director of Social Impact Partnerships for Hungry Harvest. And really my intersection of work is between food and health. So thinking about the value that having healthy foods on the table has for our health and healthy aging. And then I'll pass it off to Haley.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Whitney. So I know Crystal kindly said this at the beginning. I'm an assistant professor and a nurse at Johns Hopkins School of Nursing. And I have a research area that focuses on two things, improving cardiovascular health and also improving representation in cardiovascular health research and research more broadly. And that's actually how I had the opportunity to meet Whitney, is through one of the research studies focused on improving nutrition among individuals at risk for cardiovascular disease. And so we're really excited to both be here today. And I'll go ahead and get started. So we want to start off with just a broad background about chronic diseases, as that can be an important part of an aging experience. So chronic diseases are defined broadly as conditions that last 1 year or more and require ongoing medical attention or might limit activities of daily living that we do. And chronic diseases are common. About 60% of US adults have at least one chronic disease. And oftentimes, actually, about 40% of individuals have two or more chronic diseases. And you can see over on the right-hand side of this slide some chronic diseases I imagine some of you are familiar with, either through your own lived experience or through someone you care for and love. And so, again, these are common. But the good thing is that lifestyle choices that we make can help prevent and manage these chronic conditions. And so here are just some of the main lifestyle choices that can support your health and these chronic diseases as we age. And today we'll really be focused in, like we said, on eating a nutritious diet. But I did want to acknowledge that in addition to eating a well-balanced diet, there are these other lifestyle choices that we can make that support our health and well-being. And these include exercising regularly. So one of the suggestions is that we engage in 150 minutes of moderate physical activity a week. We limit our alcohol intake and don't start drinking alcohol if we have not already. We get at least 7 hours of sleep, ideally between 7 and 9, and we limit and quit our tobacco use. And so, again, I just wanted to give this full picture before we really dive into, having a well-balanced diet, to show that there are more things that we can do to support our health and well-being outside of just diet. And then I really want to take the opportunity to frame this conversation in terms of heart health, as that's one area of interest I know a lot of us have, and we've heard through feedback. And so first, let's think about what is heart disease and why is it so important. And heart disease can refer to several terms, and I have some of these on the slide. So when we talk about heart disease, this can include a heart attack, or what we hear of as AFib, or heart failure. And it's important because heart disease is a leading cause of death in the United States. And the good thing is that up to 90% of heart disease is preventable through lifestyle choices like diet. And that's why we really wanted to talk about that today. And then my second bullet here is actually talking about risk factors that are also chronic diseases that put us at risk for heart disease. And so this is diabetes and obesity and hypertension or high blood pressure. And like I keep pointing out, as evidence shows that eating a healthy diet can help us prevent and manage heart disease and its risk factors. But not only that, there's benefits of nutrition beyond your heart, and there's many of those. And so before we dive into some of these diets, I just want to show that research has shown that healthy diets are associated with lower risk for several outcomes, including cognitive decline and impairment. So think of brain health, and lower risks for some cancers, such as colon cancer, lower risk for osteoporosis, so it helps keep your bones healthier, and lower risk for other chronic diseases like chronic kidney disease. And so you might be wondering, well, what are some examples of diet that can promote my health? And I name a few here that we've seen in research that are evidence-based and that work to prevent different health outcomes and promote different health outcomes. And these might be ones you've heard about. So they include the Mediterranean diet, or the DASH diet is a common one you might have heard if you have high blood pressure or hypertension, and it stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And then there's the MIND diet, which is actually a combination of those two. And these diets have more in common than you might think. And what I want to show here is that there's many different diets that support your health. And really what matters is thinking about how they fit into your lifestyle and your health goals, and how you can use them to promote your health goals and longevity. And so the big question we think about is, well, how can I improve my diet, and how can I follow these dietary patterns that I just talked about and briefly mentioned on the last slide? And one thing I'll point out before continuing is that there should have been a Eat Better fact sheet that was included in your package. And so that is a guide by the American Heart Association on some quick tips, and some of which we'll cover today. So look for that sheet to follow along on some of this. So diving into some specific recommendations is, well, what foods should I eat? What should I focus on? And this slide specifically follows some recommendations from that earlier dietary pattern I mentioned, which was the DASH diet. And the DASH diet recommends several food groups that can boost our intake of nutrients that promote our health and well-being. This includes vegetables and fruit. And these are items that you actually see across all of those diets I mentioned. So consuming those produce. And actually, the DASH diet recommends about 4 to 5 servings per day of these two food groups. But you'll see, depending on what your health goals are, if you go in and maybe Google some of those other patterns, that the serving size may vary depending. It also promotes things like whole grains and beans, nuts, and seeds. Most of the diets promote lean proteins and fish. Some vary on their recommendations. For example, the Mediterranean diet might promote fish more than the DASH diet, but all are inclusive of lean proteins and fish. The DASH diet also promotes consuming low and fat-free dairy compared to full-fat dairy. If dairy, was there a question?
I would love to hear about the diet, and also, how is Hungry Feast apart? How are they working with your organization or your projects to address these issues about diet and food insecurity? And at about 5:30, we're going to go into questions and answers. So we just wanted to make sure that both you and Whitney had a chance to share your insights.
Okay, great. And is it okay with you, Crystal, if I save that question for the end?
Sure. Just wanted to let you know that we will be going to questions and answers soon. Thank you.
Okay, great. Then I will scurry along to make sure we cover a lot of good material. Okay, so then the next thing we think about is, well, what foods should I limit or eat in moderation? And that includes things like high-fat meats or sugar-sweetened beverages, and sweets and sodium. And it's not to say that you should never eat these, but it's to say that we can try to work towards our improving our habits to limiting these foods. My next slide, since Crystal reminded me of time, is that I'm actually going to skip, because I did also share an infographic that you should have received, where I had pulled some of these tips from that go over each food group I just talked about. So please use that infographic to help guide some of your strategies to finding foods to support your health. What I want to spend my time on then is navigating a food label and things to pay attention to on your food label to help you choose foods that fit your health goals. So a couple of the big items to point out are the serving size and how many serving size are in your container. Now, this is important because sometimes, and most often, the nutrition facts you see on your label are actually about one serving size, but oftentimes, such as in this party size bag of popcorn I show on the screen, there's multiple servings per container. And so it's important to take that into consideration when you're trying to understand how much of a specific nutrient or how many calories you're consuming. Some other things to pay attention to are the percent daily value on the label and the ingredients listed. And these are helpful because they can guide your understanding of what nutrients are included in your foods. And if their food that you're consuming is primarily made of whole foods. And so what you would look for as a tip in the ingredients is foods that have whole foods listed first in the ingredients rather than additives or preservatives. And so what I'll do is show an example of how you can compare labels to make informed decisions. And so this slide specifically shows two labels from cans of beans, and they contain very different sodium levels. And so I'll kind of draw your attention to the first one in the middle of my screen, where you can see that there's 450 milligrams of sodium. But if you I searched just a low salt or sodium option, and you can see I was able to find a can of beans with the same serving size that has about 200 milligrams of sodium. So you can really try to compare labels on the similar products to make informed decisions. And so before I turn it over to Whitney, just to wrap up my component of it in a timely manner, is that one tip I have when looking at the percent daily value for guidance on which choose of foods is use a 5 and 20 rule. So look for foods, if you're aiming to have a low in some nutrients, like your saturated fats or your sodium, try to find something with 5% or less. And to understand if it's very high in that category, look for things that have 20% or more. And so things that have 20% or more sodium, maybe we want to limit in our diet. And so that's just one quick reference you can use when you're in the grocery store and trying to make a healthier choice between your frozen food meals, is use those numbers as a guide of how to make healthier choices. I'm going to move forward so Whitney has lots of time. But what I'll say here is just really when we're thinking about creating a path for ourselves to make healthier lifestyle choices, really start with one small change, one day at a time, and see how you can add on to that and really finding something that aligns with your lifestyle and your health goals. Okay, so I'll pass it over to Whitney, and just please say next when you want me to continue.
Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you so much, Haley. So we talked a lot about servings and nutrition labels and kind of what we recommend, diets that are recommended for healthy aging. And so something that I'm always asking myself is like, what does a serving size look like? Because when I hear 4 to 5 servings of fruits or vegetables, I know for me that can feel really daunting. So thinking about, one bell pepper, I took a look at some of your favorite foods. So from like stir fry to rice and curry, you can dice up a bell pepper or carrots or peas and throw this into that type of meal. 8 broccoli florets, grabbing an apple. So thinking about how maybe you could stack some of these so that you're able to get some of these serving sizes first thing in the morning. Maybe you have a slice of whole grain toast with some eggs that have cherry tomatoes and bell peppers. So thinking about what that serving size really looks like. And then we also have some examples for whole grains. So a slice of whole grain bread, a half cup of whole grain pasta or rice, just to give an example of what that looks like, especially as we're looking at fresh foods that might not always have a nutrition label on them. Go to the next one. The other thing that I'm often thinking about is how I can know what a serving size looks like when maybe I don't have measuring cups around, or something like meat and fish that doesn't always have, an easy measuring distribution to it. Thinking about for beans and grains, the size of your fist actually equals about a serving. So whenever you're dishing out a serving, thinking about that as a reference. And then also the size of the palm of your hand for meat or fish as a reference point. So the photos are there. You can also think about a deck of cards. So if something is about the size of a deck of cards, it's likely a serving. Go to the next one. The other thing that Hungry Harvest is thinking a lot about is thinking about reducing food waste. It's really important to us as an organization and myself as an individual, thinking about it in ways to save money and then eat fresher produce for longer. So if you do have fresh produce and you're trying to think about how to make the shelf life last a little bit longer, I've got a few tips. So I'll talk about a few of my favorites because I know we're tight on time, but we'll go through some resources as well. And you're able to dive into these on your own based on what you really enjoy eating and might want to make last a little bit longer. So for that citrus, we're thinking about putting that into the refrigerator drawer. So instead of leaving lemons or limes out on the counter, they're really best in the refrigerator. When it comes to greens, I always recommend putting a cloth or a paper towel on an airtight container with your fresh greens in there. And then if anything does happen to wilt, you can always make an ice bath. So ice with a little bit of water and throw your greens in there, and that should bring them right back to life. You can do this with a lot of vegetables, from root vegetables and carrots to greens, asparagus. A little bit of ice water can really make something come back to life right before you cook it. Go to the next one. Peppers are a really great one. So one tip here is to store peppers unwashed and wash them only when you're ready to cook them. Similar with berries, moisture can sometimes create a little bit of mold before storing. So kind of leaving them unwashed until you're ready to eat will help them last a little bit longer. And then I know we've got a lot of these, so we can skip this. We'll talk about broccoli and asparagus. And like I said, with those berries, if you're able to avoid washing them until you put them in, you're ready to start snacking on them, that's what we'd recommend. And then when it comes to broccoli, this can also be thrown in an ice bath to give it a little bit more life. And then you are also able to use the stalks. So thinking about reducing food waste while also thinking about having your food last a little bit longer. I know it's the worst feeling when you buy fresh produce and then it doesn't actually, last as long as you are hoping that it will, and you take it out of the fridge. So these are a few of our tips to help make that last a little bit longer. And then we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. To talk about some resources that are available. So we talked a lot about increasing the shelf life of your healthy food. Johns Hopkins has really amazing resources on how to reduce your waste and better understand food waste. So thinking both about how to stretch our own food dollars while thinking about the health of ourselves and the planet. And then Hungry Harvest also has a storage guide and food waste tips if you are curious and want to dive a little bit more into produce that you commonly use. We also have some community markets across Baltimore City and County. And then there are a few other great resources. Pratt Free Market has a free food market located at Southeast Anchor Library. And Baltimore City offers eating together meals that are no cost and available to Baltimore City seniors. And then, of course, there are research studies available. These are always a really great way to continue learning and engaging with dietary quality and nutrition. So I'll have Haley introduce those in just a moment. But I did want to just highlight where some of those markets are in Baltimore City and County that Hungry Harvest runs on the next slide. So we have 6 weekly markets that operate in Baltimore City, County, and Frederick County. These are at Mercy Medical Center and a few of the University of Maryland medical campuses. We offer fresh produce for $1, $2, or $3. Our goal is that you're going home with a bag of fresh fruits and vegetables and not paying too much money for them. And then they're all ran by local community organizations, open to anybody. There's no verification or ID needed. Anybody is welcomed to shop. And then we'll go ahead and talk. I'll pass it off to Haley to talk about Connect.
All right, everybody. I know we're right at time, so the last thing I'll say is that if you're interested in learning more about tips for your heart health, one resource we have is joining Connect, which is a learning community that was created to increase awareness on heart health and heart health research with a larger goal of improving diversity in heart-related research. So if you sign up, you receive tips to your phone on improving your heart health, not just about nutrition, but more largely some of those other lifestyle factors I mentioned earlier on as well. And then I know we have lots of questions and so many that I've already seen come in the chat. So if it's okay.
No, and also wanted to let you know that you're in luck. Dr. L.A. McCrae, my co-host, will be funneling some of the questions that are in the chat and be guiding this discussion for the next 10 minutes or more. Dr. L.A.?
Yeah, thanks so much, Haley and Whitney. So many great things you gave us to consider. I feel like I'm leading my whole food life wrong. Y'all can come in, organize the fridge, do all the things. So I wanted to look at some of these questions that came up in the chat. And I see from Darcinia, thinking about the information that y'all presented to us, how do we work to reduce inflammation through our diet? And thinking about supplements or food groups that help in the prevention of inflammation, and thinking about how that intersects with some of the issues and concerns that we have as we are aging, like arthritis, right? So how can we be more active to address that?
That is a great question. Oh, yes, I can take the PowerPoint down. I'm sorry. Okay, hi. Yes, so that's a great question about anti-inflammatory foods. And I can talk a little bit about types of foods that we know can reduce inflammation. And I will not give recommendations on supplements because that's not an area I am that familiar on. But when we think about an anti-inflammatory diet, a lot of that was incorporated in some of the diets I mentioned. So for example, the Mind diet really focuses on some of these foods, such as olive oil, green leafy vegetables. So think of your foods like spinach and kale. Those are anti-inflammatory foods. Nuts like almonds or walnuts. And then the last one that I think about a lot when I think of anti-inflammatory are fruits such as your berries, strawberries and blueberries. And so those are the biggest recommendations. And then sometimes you also see fish included in that list, such as like salmon, for example, of foods that you can eat to help reduce inflammation. And then, of course, there are foods that cause inflammation. And so when we think of fried foods or those sugar-sweetened beverages, and so it's kind of, like we said, increasing your intake of those foods that do not and trying to limit those that do. But I'll see if anyone else, if Whitney has anything to add there.
I think you answered that perfectly.
Great.
Yeah, outside of like just eating a pint of blueberries, how can we more effectively integrate those foods into our eating?
From like a meal planning perspective?
Right.
That's a good question. And I think, that really, what I'll say is that really depends on someone's health goals and what recommendations they might receive from their specific physician or other care team, because everybody is so different. So I wouldn't give specific guidance, but what I would say is one thing I tell people is when they're thinking about how to incorporate these changes is start keeping a log of what you are eating. And sometimes, if you really like, for example, there's different digital tools, or you can just do pen and paper method, and start thinking about where in your day to day you can incorporate some of these healthier choices and what foods you might take out of your diet to reduce inflammation. And so in any change or goal you have, I would start by starting to keep either like a mental log of what you're consuming, or writing it down, or tracking it in a smartphone app, to get a good baseline of where you're at.
I would
Nice.
also say, think about your favorite foods. So I love that everyone was putting in what they really enjoy eating, and think about what you, as you're taking those steps forward towards healthier eating, think about how to integrate fresh fruits and vegetables into what you already love. So if it's stir fry, maybe look at how you can incorporate more vegetables in that, or maybe cooking with heart healthy oils as a swap. So looking at some of your favorite foods, maybe it's swapping out, white pasta with whole grain pasta, or swapping out noodles with a different fruit or with a different vegetable that can be substituted in. Thinking about, not necessarily taking away the joys of eating. I think that's really important that we all hold on to that, but where can you integrate fruits and vegetables into what you're already, having into your diet to get one step closer to reaching your health goals?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I want to sort of put these comments together as one. So looking at how many milligrams of salt can we consider low sodium? So I want to ask, like, is there a low sodium myth? Is any amount of sodium good in our diets? And then looking at the efficacy, the health efficacy of protein bars and protein drinks. If either of y'all, both of y'all could talk on that for a minute.
Yeah, good question. So there's some different guidance, but a rule of thumb is that we want to intake less than 2,300 or 2,300 milligrams per day. And a higher goal than that is even to go towards 1,500 milligrams per day, especially if you have conditions like high blood pressure. Now, you bring up a really good point, and one that we had on a slide that we kind of skipped through, but there's things like protein bars that we often, I know myself, I grab it to go, and it's a quick thing to eat and feel full and energized after. But a lot of those prepackaged foods tend to have a sneaky amount of sodium or other nutrients that we want to lower in our diet, such as added sugars or saturated fat. So when thinking about limiting our sodium specifically, there's a few ways to do that. And the one that often comes to people's mind is not putting salt on their food, not salting their food. But two other big contributors to consuming a lot of salt are in prepackaged foods. So think of exactly your breakfast bars, or more common things we think of like your chips and other snack food. But also is when you dine out, one way is to ask, you're dining out and have a server to ask for salt not to be added to your meal. So those are some other things I think about when I think about eating high sodium diets. I love Cheryl's suggestion, by the way, on incorporating fresh smoothies.
Feel free to send some to all the C-Rack members. Y'all gonna be making some smoothies. And so when I think about this idea of like, what we have, the prepackaged food, natural food, frozen food, whether it's, frozen fish, frozen fruits, is there a change in the nutritional value that we need to be aware of?
Really good question, and one that we get a lot. And what I'll say is, so specifically, I definitely want Whitney to jump in on this too, but what I will say is, we know that canned and frozen vegetables and fruits offer a lot of benefits as far as shelf life go, and oftentimes cost and convenience. They're still rich in nutrients. They provide a lot of health benefit, just like fresh produce would. What I would say specifically regarding canned option is sometimes there are possible additives, specifically with salt and sugar. And so I would think about trying to find canned vegetable options that are labeled low sodium or no added sugar for the fruits. And so that would be my biggest recommendation when you're shopping and trying to compare, fresh versus frozen versus canned. But certainly those are things I incorporate into my diet, and definitely would recommend as a way to increase your vegetable and fruit consumption. see what Whitney has to say too.
Yeah, I would say something really similar. I think just looking at that food label and making sure that the ingredients that are on the back of it are really primarily the vegetable or fruit that you're trying to eat, and that you're not seeing that sugar, you're not seeing that added salt. Frozen can be a really good option. And oftentimes, frozen foods are picked and then immediately frozen to try to help restore some of their maximum amount of nutrition in those fruits or vegetables that you're having. So while fresh is really amazing, frozen especially, and then canned, if it doesn't have those additives in it, can also help, allow you to eat a little bit healthier while not thinking about waste as much and having that convenience.
Wow, this is so thought-provoking, Doc. I don't know about you, but they've got me thinking about, I don't want to waste food for the environment, but also my own waste. I had a child a couple of years ago, and I'm still working on that bounce back. So, Haley and Whitney, I will have to tag along with you. I know I've talked with Dr. LA offline about walking around Baltimore. So, Doc, I'm gonna have to. You're gonna have to take me up on my request, and that actually leads me to think about our next segment. We are going to, Doc, for the first time ever, we're going to do some yoga live with Misha Saunders, who is a moveologist who actually does exercise training at the Waxter Center. I don't want to be off color again, but I will say it anyway. She offers pole dance training for older adults as well. So if you want to come out and get your move on and get your groove on, feel free to do so. She is a body chemist and a senior enrichment specialist and founder of Moxie Moves. And she is going to take us through a 9 to 10 minute exercise session.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear
No.
you, and then we are going to go into our breakout rooms. Welcome, Misha.
Now, when you look on the computer, you should see me under Brian Jeffrey. Okay.
Got to start your video so I can spotlight you.
And while she does that, we're going to give a special shout out to the Waxter Center as they opened up their doors to also host a watch party for us.
All right, so Crystal, you ready for us to get started?
Go for it.
Yes. You say yes? Can you hear me?
Yep, we're ready.
Okay. All right, so take your arms to the side. Reach up. Good. Take it off. You want to start about one and
I got I think I'm
without a destination. I'm never spending time wording around till I drop. My mind is in once
Lost your video, but we can still kind of hear you.
Did she freeze?
Yeah, I think we lost the video.
She's not highlighted.
We have 2 minutes.
Some good music though.
There we go.
timeless hopes that never stop. No, oh, my soul is there. Oh, what about you? My mind is in give me a little once more.
We got one more time.
Time is up.
Come on now, y'all. Give yourselves a hand. Give yourselves a hand, as my colleague, Dr. L.A. McCray would say, give yourselves a hand. Now, here's the fun. Next, we are going to self-select our breakout rooms. As we mentioned to you earlier in the day, we have 3 breakout sessions. And once you select, 1 is the clubhouse, 2 is the man cave, and 3 is the sister circle. And each room is supposed to end at 6:55. We may grant you grace and give you 1 more minute, but keep in mind we're ending on time today. Oh.
Hey, Hades. Hi, Pam.
Hello.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do we have a topic? Did I miss something?
This is my
Just
first
giving people time to
doing.
join.
Okay, excellent. I was gonna say, I'm one of the speakers, so I definitely know the topic, which we'll be talking about some of the new weight loss medication and updates on weight management and obesity treatment. And Michelle Tenner will also be joining as a speaker as well. She's there, so we'll wait, I think, a couple more minutes. And this is my first time joining, but I think someone will introduce us. If not, I will go ahead and introduce us. Pamela, do you think we should just go ahead and get started?
Yes, I was just looking to see who is meant to be the moderator.
Well, it sounds like you all have had a full 2 days. Have you guys enjoyed it? Put an emoji in the chat to tell us how you felt about the last 2 days. Happy face, excited face,
Thumbs up, maybe.
thumbs up.
Okay. So Crystal was meant to be. Should maybe still helping people.
Somebody in the chat say great. I see lots of thumbs ups. Awesome.
Hello, and welcome to the Sister Circle, where we have a safe space for women to share and talk about the topics that are most important to us. And I'm not sure, Ariana, if I am interrupting your presentation or discussion, and if so, I truly apologize.
Not at all. We were just introducing one another and getting to know each other and talking about sort of the last couple of days or last day or so and how it's been.
I tell you, you guys are, you're one of our fan favorites. When we looked at the survey data in our sister circle in particular, people really wanted to talk about weight management, and what is healthy, and especially in the age of Ozempic. And I personally I'm not sure of the formal name, but participants, we have a wonderful lineup for you today with Dr. Ariana Cho and Ms. Michelle Tatter, who is, and you guys just wear so many hats that I am not going to try and just share all of your expertise, because I want to turn this over to both of you to share in this discussion.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Crystal.
All right, so I have some slides to share. I'm going to kind of keep them very brief in general, but I'm happy to go in more detail and more provide more information about any of the topics. But we wanted to provide a lot of times for discussion and to ask questions as well. So I'll be presenting some brief slides first, and then Michelle will be giving a brief presentation as well. And then, happy to take questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself. And I apologize, my cat is hungry for dinner and I didn't feed him. So if you hear meowing or scratching in the background, that is my cat. All righty, awesome. So I am an associate professor at Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, and I'm also a director of research as well as a nurse practitioner at the Healthful Eating Activity and Weight program at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. I do a lot of research around obesity treatment, both behavioral obesity treatments, thinking about different lifestyle approaches to help people lose weight and, importantly, maintain it long term. And I also do trials looking at some of the new pharmacotherapies or anti-obesity medications for weight management. So I wanted to start off giving some statistics about the narrative of obesity. Some of the results from different research studies have shown that the majority of people, 85% of people with obesity, believe it's completely their responsibility. Oftentimes, people, you can see about 48% of people believe obesity is a lifestyle choice resulting from a person's eating and exercise habits. And importantly, for a provider like myself, there's oftentimes a really long gap between people struggling with their weight and having their first discussion with a healthcare provider. And we know oftentimes that weight gain might be progressive over time. So it's especially concerning because that might mean that, again, they're gaining weight and struggling for a while before they might approach a healthcare provider. I also wanted to highlight here just a brief graph. I promise I'll keep the graphs low for this presentation, but a lot of people are going to things like the internet or their family and friends for information about managing their weight. And we know that this can oftentimes not be evidence-based, and what might work for one person might not work for another. So hopefully I'll be providing some information here about some different ways in terms of weight loss. So oftentimes there is a lot of stigma and assumptions about obesity treatment and obesity in general and what is contributing to it. We know that there's a lot of biological, environmental, and societal factors really contributing to obesity. And this is just a pictogram that you can see here in terms of things like eating culture, changes in our food environment, living in a food desert, or what's called a food swamp, where maybe there's a lot of fast food restaurants and really not access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And this can contribute to weight gain, but we also have learned so much about the biology of obesity and the physiology underlying it. And this has allowed us to develop some newer medications that help to address the physiology of obesity as well, recognizing that it's not just about willpower and that there's a physiology behind it. I also wanted to highlight here that there is a shifting paradigm right now going on in the field of obesity and the treatment and prevention of related conditions. So obesity has been associated with over 230 complications ranging from things like heart failure, stroke, obstructive sleep apnea, polycystic ovarian syndrome, as well as things like osteoarthritis. And obesity oftentimes can be thought of as a root cause of many of these conditions, but I wanted to also acknowledge that treating obesity will not necessarily be able to solve all of these conditions. So it's not necessarily a magic bullet for all of these different conditions, and that there's also a lot of other contributing factors that can influence having all of these complications. This is the obesity treatment pyramid. There's a multitude of different sort of approaches that we can use for weight loss. Lifestyle modification really forms the foundation of all of obesity treatment, consisting in things like dietary changes, which we just heard about, physical activity, as well as behavior modification. Anti-obesity medications are available for individuals with a body mass index 27 or greater with comorbidities like type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure, or greater than 30 without comorbidities, or that's who at least they've been FDA approved for. We know oftentimes that there's guardrails, unfortunately, that are being put up by insurances that unfortunately when people, even if they're indicated, sometimes they don't have access to the medications. There's also devices that is sort of an emerging category. Unfortunately, insurance typically doesn't cover these. However, there are things like balloon devices that take up space in the stomach, as well as different sort of cellulose capsules that can be swallowed that again sort of take up space in the stomach. For some examples of different devices that are being developed. Bariatric surgery or bariatric metabolic surgery is recommended for individuals oftentimes with a BMI greater than 30 with uncontrolled type 2 diabetes, 35 or greater with comorbidities, and then 40 or greater without comorbidities. And for all of these treatments, my goal as a provider is to help patients lose at least 5% or greater of their initial weight loss. We talk a lot about percent initial weight losses, especially in obesity treatment research. And just, how we would calculate this is you have your starting weight minus your current weight divided by your starting weight. So for someone 200 pounds, if they lost 10 pounds, you could see that this was a percent weight loss of 5%. And again, the clinical goal is for people to lose that amount of weight loss because that's the amount that we know starts to produce clinically significant benefits in things like blood pressure as well as glucose. And to get to this level of weight loss, oftentimes high intensity lifestyle treatment is recommended. And there are a number of different task forces and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which provides reimbursement for high intensity lifestyle treatment. This is typically thought of as 14 or more visits in the first 6 months and then continued monthly visits for maintenance because we know continued care is really important for obesity, which is a chronic condition. Oftentimes we think of obesity and weight loss sometimes as sort of like a quick fix, losing 10 pounds for a wedding or an event, but we know obesity is a chronic condition that really needs chronic care. These are some different behavioral strategies that are typically recommended. So achieving a high level of physical activity, typically 200 to 300 minutes per week of low to moderate intensity physical activity like walking, as well as resistance exercises, and then decreasing sedentary behavior. And then typically a caloric deficit is recommended. You can see here for individuals less than 250 pounds, it'd be about 1,200 to 1,400 calories per day. And then for individuals 250 pounds or greater, it would be 1,500 to 1,800. We also have learned a lot about the amount of weight loss and different benefits that can be achieved with different amounts. So here you can see at a 0 to 4.9% initial weight loss here on your left screen, different improvements. And then for things like type 2 diabetes remission, cardiovascular mortality, heart failure with preservative ejection fracture, so a certain type of heart failure, that higher weight losses might be needed to achieve improvements in these sort of conditions. And to get there, we can use different approaches. So again, for a lifestyle treatment, we tend to see weight losses closer to the 5%. Weight loss that is behavioral in nature can be really helpful to modify the external environment and provide people with different sort of behavioral strategies to lose weight. However, we know with the anti-obesity medications that these can really be helpful to targeting the physiology of weight regulation. And I'm not going to go through these all in detail, but you can see that there's a variety of different type of medications and that they have different targets and different mechanisms of action. We're going to be talking about the newest ones, the Ozempic or Wegovy, and Zepbound or Mounjaro. And these medications, because it's so new, there's a lot of different names that are sort of floated around in the scientific literature as well as sort of media about what they're called. So some call them second generation anti-obesity medications, GLP-1 medications, incretin-based therapies. And these include semaglutide, which would be Wegovy, which is the medication approved for chronic weight management, or Ozempic, which is approved for type 2 diabetes. Those are sort of the marketed names, but they all have the active ingredient of semaglutide in it. Tirzepatide, which would be Zepbound or Mounjaro, but again, both have the active ingredient of tirzepatide, with Zepbound being the one that's for chronic weight management. You can see how much larger the average weight loss is in terms of excess of placebo at the end of the trail here. So for semaglutide, you can see it's 28 pounds versus and 47 pounds on average for tirzepatide. So again, much bigger than these older medications. All right. So what exactly is GLP-1? So I'm just going to give a very, very brief overview of what these medications kind of help to do and sort of what they're based on, or why they're called GLP-1. What is GLP-1 exactly? So there's something called the incretin effect that occurs in the body. And as you can see here, when people are injected with IV amounts of glucose or sugar, what happens in healthy patients versus patients with diabetes? So you can see kind of the curves look kind of similar. The one for diabetes is a little bit flatter and then kind of gets higher later. And then the difference when someone takes something orally. So if someone takes oral sugar, you can see for healthy patients that don't have diabetes that they have this nice spike in insulin, which is what we want, compared to people who have diabetes where it's kind of flat over time. And that's called what's called the incretin effect, this difference that occurs between injected IV glucose or sugar versus what occurs orally. And the question is, okay, so why does this happen? We know this is an incretin effect. It's a marker of diabetes. And this reduced incretin effect is associated with diabetes. So what happens when we, again, inject people with IV glucose, the glucose goes into the bloodstream and then hits the pancreas and then releases some insulin. Whereas if we orally ingest glucose, you can see here that it not only triggers glucose, but also triggers GLP-1 and what's called GIP from the stomach. And this results in both of these things hitting the pancreas and result in a more robust insulin effect. So that's sort of what this incretin effect is. So the GLP-1 is a naturally occurring hormone that occurs in the body. The medications have been modified so that it's longer acting and that it also helps to improve things like satiety because it's a satiety hormone. All right, so I just wanted to also highlight some of the timeline of the incretin-based medications. I know there's been a lot of hype about them in the news recently, but I wanted to highlight here that this class of medications has actually been around for quite a while. In terms of the diabetes medications, you can see here One of the first ones, exenatide, which is a shorter acting medication, was first approved in 2005 by the FDA for diabetes. This is for obesity. So the first type of medication was liraglutide. This is an injectable medication that's injected daily. And then subcutaneous semaglutide, you can see here, was approved in 2021, and tirzepatide in 2023 for obesity treatment or chronic weight management. Both of these medications are injected subcutaneously weekly. So again, they're longer acting than liraglutide. I also wanted to highlight here just some of the benefits that we're learning of these medications beyond weight loss. And you can see here there's different trials that have been going on and different results highlighted here in green for these different conditions. And then there's a lot of different other conditions that are currently under study right now in terms of the effect of these medications on things like dementia, substance use disorder, binge eating disorder, as well as things like even cancer. And these medications do have a lot of effects beyond weight loss. So you can see here from a study, almost half of participants who were on tirzepatide achieved normal glycemia if they had type 2 diabetes. For participants who had pre-diabetes, 80% were able to achieve normal glycemia who were on semaglutide. For studies of obstructive sleep apnea, they found that 42% to 50%, so almost half of participants were able to achieve remission from their obstructive sleep apnea or reach mild non-symptomatic status. And importantly, semaglutide in a study showed a risk reduction of 20%, so decreasing the risk of things like cardiovascular death, as well as non-fatal heart attack and non-fatal stroke. And then I just wanted to highlight really quickly, lastly, some of the dietary considerations with these medications, because we know the medications don't do it all. So it's important to make sure people are having enough protein to maintain their lean muscle mass, staying well hydrated, having enough fiber, having enough micronutrients. So oftentimes individuals with obesity might have pre-existing deficiencies in micronutrients, so making sure that they're really able to have supplements for that or able to get a well-rounded diet to cover that. And overall having a dietary plan really to promote cardiometabolic health or cardiovascular health, which we just heard about. For physical activity, it's also really important to remember to kind of make sure that people are exercising, because exercise has so many great heart benefits aside from weight loss. And resistance training is also really important for anyone on these medications, because we want to, again, preserve any sort of muscle mass that might be that's really necessary to help improve overall health. And lastly, I just wanted to end with the fact that no medication can fully replicate having a healthy nutrition environment and being able to have enough time to cook, as well as having enough time to exercise. So it's really important, again, for people, anyone on the medication, to make sure that they're also able to achieve and have a healthy diet, as well as increase their physical activity.
Interesting how you shared with us the importance of both lifestyle changes and the fact that there are medications that are available to help us with weight management and changes. I would like us to transition over to Michelle Tedder just to gain her perspective, as well, Dr. Chow, on this topic, just because I do not want to cut you off. And I want to make sure that both of you get a chance to share your insights. So just so both of you know, I'm going to turn my camera off. When you see my face again in a spotlight, it's like to give you a signal to kind of wrap up. Okay? Thank you.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Ariana, for framing that so well for us and providing the medical background. I'm here. My name is Michelle Tedder, and I'm a nurse, and I wear several hats. I work as a senior program manager for the Black Women's Health Imperative. I also am a patient advocate and subject matter expert on obesity, based on my lived experience with the disease of obesity. And I recently started a podcast called Your Healthcare Provider, that talks about all of this stuff and brings together patients and providers, healthcare providers, and policymakers to discuss these issues in a way that hopefully gives us access and promotes change in the space of obesity care. So that's just a little bit of my background, but I'm not going to bore you with a whole lot of that. But I do want to share my personal story. And I think that lived experience is always the best way to illustrate all the wonderful data and information that Dr. Child just shared with us, because I love the data, but everybody's story is very different. So I hope that by the time I'm done sharing a little bit about my story, it'll give you some insight and hopefully provide you with some ideas and tools to use in your own story, or to help to advocate for those who are in your life who may be living with the disease of obesity. So my story goes back to childhood. I've struggled with my weight my entire life. And I can tell you that I have spent a lifetime dieting. No matter what diet was out there, I've probably been on it, probably tried it multiple times. But the sad part of that story is that no matter what traditional methods that I used, there were minimal results. I would lose some weight, quickly gain the weight back. Oftentimes I felt like I was working really, really hard to try to lose the weight, and it just was not working. I was not getting the results that I desired and really actually needed in order to prevent longer term chronic disease. But unfortunately, as my weight increased, so did the comorbidities came along with the weight increase. And I developed type 2 diabetes as an adult. I developed sleep apnea. I had high cholesterol, a lot of joint pain, and high blood pressure. So things were not moving in the direction that I needed them to move in. So I had a wonderful PCP who really helped me to understand that obesity was a disease. And I know sometimes that's a dirty word to people, but I feel like if we can have those honest conversations and call it what it is, it actually empowers us and gives us more options and tools in order to deal with this particular chronic disease. Because oftentimes obesity is the underlying issue to the rest of these issues. And as I continue to share my story, you'll see how that applies. So my big transformation started on December 4th of 2017, almost 7 years ago. After many, many years of trying all kinds of things, my PCP and I decided, you know what, it's time to do something different. And it was in having a very compassionate, trustworthy healthcare provider who was able to help me to understand that this disease was bigger than me and that it was not my fault. Because I think a lot of times we walk around thinking that it is our fault and that we should be able to lose the weight. And we, that somehow it is a mark of moral failure, which none of those things are true. Diet culture has told us that that's what it is. But the reality is that I was dealing with a chronic condition, and that no matter what I did from a traditional standpoint, it was never going to give me the result that I desired because of the metabolic changes that had happened in my own body. So my pre-surgery weight was 323 pounds. I am 5'1". I'm 7 foot in my mind, however, but the charts say that I'm 5'1", and at that time my BMI was 61, and my hemoglobin A1C was greater than 8, and a normal hemoglobin A1C is below 6. So we were not there, but I definitely wanted to get there. I just want to share a couple of things that I've learned on my own journey about obesity care. And the truth about obesity is that it requires multiple therapies in most cases. Weight loss surgery was one of the necessary tools in my toolbox, but it did not end there, and it has never ended there. There's no one size that fits all approach for anybody who's living with the disease of obesity. Everybody's unique. Treatment has to be unique also. My journey continues to require a comprehensive treatment plan, and that includes medication. I continue to participate in lifestyle change programs. I have a trainer. I practice all kind of behavioral health approaches. I deal with my mental health. and I have access to healthy foods. The problem with treating obesity is that unfortunately, everyone does not have access to all of those tools in the toolbox. We all have a right to them, but we don't all have access. So I've been blessed and fortunate to be able to have access to those things. One of the things that I want to highlight for you all is that if you are living with this disease, you have a right to proper care. And back a few months ago, they developed something called the Obesity Bill of Rights. And it was a kind of a rites of passage, if you will, that healthcare providers are encouraged to follow. And the basic tenets are that you deserve accurate, clear, trusted, and accessible information. If you're struggling with this, if your PCP doesn't know how to manage it, they should be able to refer you or be able to tell you where to get the information. You deserve to be treated with respect. Oftentimes, a lot of judgment happens within healthcare spaces. I certainly experienced that along my journey. You have a right to make collaborative treatment decisions. I chose weight loss surgery. That may or may not be something you want to do, but there's many, many things now that are available, and you should have the option to work with your provider to come up with a collaborative treatment option that works for you. You deserve to have treatment from qualified health care providers. If you're not getting what you need, if your healthcare provider is not working with you or listening to you, it's okay to say, I'm out. I'm going to find someone who is going to listen to me and work with me, not against me. You deserve to have person-centered obesity care. Like I said, there is not one size that fits all. So you deserve an individualized treatment plan. Accessible obesity care and services should come from health systems. Your healthcare system owes you this. Older adults with obesity deserve to receive quality obesity care, and everyone should have access to the full spectrum of obesity treatment options. You can Google Obesity Bill of Rights and you can dive into this a little bit deeper, but you need to know that this is your right and you have a right to ask for it. Now, I'm showing you this before and after picture because I want you to see what quality access to care looks like. My type 2 diabetes is in remission. My cholesterol medication was discontinued. My joint pain greatly improved. My sleep apnea greatly improved. I was taking 2 heavy-duty blood pressure medications. I now only take 1, and that one was cut in half. I now have a BMI of 45, and my hemoglobin A1C is 5.1. So I am
Amen.
Amen is right. So I am a living testimony to what can happen when you have comprehensive, individualized obesity care, and it absolutely changed my life.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Crystal, you were saying something, but you were on mute.
I tell you, that must have been a sign from God, because I really want to say to you that both of you, Dr. Chow and Michelle, have really inspired us. And my one question, because I know our session wraps up at 6:25, is okay, how do we pull all this together and be our own advocate? I know myself, I have some weight issues, and I feel like I just switched doctors because I was starting to feel body shamed. So what advice do you both have for us as an audience that we can take home with us? In 2 minutes, please share.
I'll say from a patient perspective, I mean, I feel like I'm a unicorn because I have both the nurse, the healthcare providers side of it and the patient side of it. I would say that indeed, if your healthcare provider is not listening to you, if you feel shame or your person is still telling you to exercise more and eat less, yeah, you need to get out of there. You need to do some research and you need to find a new provider. And I mean, unfortunately, that's one of the things that we collectively, and I think that Ariana will agree with this, that we collectively as healthcare providers and patients are really working to change. There's been some improvements for sure, but I think the problem is that a lot of healthcare providers, one, we don't get the training in school. I know when I went to nursing school back in the day, we did not talk about obesity. We talked about diabetes. We talked about all kind of other chronic diseases, but we didn't talk about obesity. And unfortunately, we are just making that switch to putting that into healthcare curriculums. So I think that you as a patient, know yourself, follow your gut, and if you feel like, this doesn't sound right, or I don't think this person's listening to me, don't be afraid to pivot, because that's how you're going to get the care that you need.
Wow, that's really a powerful testimony and just this education that you both have provided. Would you mind hanging tight and providing responses to any questions that our audience may have? Because I'm reading the chat and I'm sure people are just fired up. Again, you guys were a fan favorite and a top request for us to get this year, and we just feel like we accomplished a goal. And with that said, we do need to transition over to our next most requested topic. And again, anyone who's old school like myself remember the song, Let's Talk About Sex. So we have on our docket Dr. Kate Thomas and Ms. Misha Saunders. Dr. Thomas is a faculty here at Johns Hopkins, and with so many accolades and knowledge about health and sexuality across the lifespan, that I would be remiss to even make an effort to provide you with their titles. I'm just going to turn this over to Dr. Thomas and to Ms. Saunders, who will be facilitating this discussion. Thank you, guys.
Hey, everyone, how's everyone doing this evening? Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So we have some of the older adults here with us live tonight, because some asked me today, they said, what is sex today? What is sex at 4 o'clock? I'm coming to the event. So we're here now, the sex is here at 6:45. So today we're going to talk about sex and vitality after 50 with Kate Thomas. Hey Kate, are you here?
I'm here.
How are you doing today?
Well, very well, thank you. This is very lovely. I've been listening to the other presentations and they've all been very good. This is a lovely concept, and glad to see so many people out there listening as well. Yeah. Do you want me to get started, Michael, a little bit? We're going to use slides tonight. We're going to just kind of chat some things up. And I guess the way I wanted to think about this, to just give you a little bit of introductory stuff, is when you think about having sex over the age of 50, we're talking about, generally speaking, most women will be in menopause by the age of 50. The average age is about 52. So when we're talking about this population, we're not only talking about aging, but we're talking about menopause and the changes therein. Now, one of the things we know about sexuality throughout the life cycle, of course, is that it's healthy. We as human beings were, designed with the sexual interest, the sexual urge, and the ability to be sexual. And because of that, we find that there are many health benefits to maintaining sexuality as we age. And we do see in my field, we do see people who are, sort of 50s, 60, 70, 80, 90, and beyond, probably, still maintaining sexuality. And the listed benefits, I don't know any depth, but there are many listed benefits. It's good for heart health. It's known to boost immune function. It keeps our pelvic floor healthy. When we're going through menopause, it can help with symptoms of menopause, better sleep. There are even ideas on how to use sex as a way to facilitate and work with our weight loss and exercise. Anyway. Yeah.
Okay, we can hear you now.
You guys,
No, we can't.
No.
we see people So I think you're not, I'm frozen. I think you're. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Your microphone's on mute again.
I don't know why mine. I don't know why I'm muted, but sorry. Okay, I'll carry on for a little bit. So we know benefits of it. The trouble is, even though we can be a sexual being from birth till death, that doesn't mean that always occurs and that there aren't significant challenges. So, and certainly some of those challenges are because of aging. For women, we're experiencing hormonal changes that lead to a decrease often in our desire to be sexual. It can lead to changes in the genitals, the vulva, the vagina, that lower blood flow to the genitals, so they don't get as aroused. Can create pain because of thinning of the vaginal walls, less lubrication. There's all of these things that can happen to us as age, and they're just part of the normal aging process. There's other things, though. We don't want to leave this just to our physiology. We also know, how do you feel sexy, when you're an older person? This is easier said than done. Our culture often, exemplifies beautiful young women and handsome young men. And, what about us? How do we do that? So part of it is that. As part of it's feeling good about ourselves, having the confidence to be sexual. So there's so many things. The other thing is relationships. For many of us, we continue, if we're fortunate, maybe to have a relationship, as we age. For others, that's not, happening. And so what does that do to our sexuality? So there's a lot of challenges. They come in the physical arena. They come because of personal thing. We also get more fatigued. We also have the aches and pains that we've just been talking about that can happen. All of these things can disrupt our.
Got to connect the Bluetooth, doesn't it?
They can hear you.
Okay. But unless we keep this discussion to kind of the negatives that are possible, we also have to recognize that we do have understanding and ideas of how to help people maintain sexuality throughout their life cycle. And this can be whether you have a partner or not. So when I make these comments, we want to think about those individuals who do not have a partner. Do they want to maintain sexuality, and what does that mean? And then if we have a relationship, how do we go about doing that? So there are two different things to look at, although they're interrelated. So we've got this idea that sex could be really good for us, for our emotional health, for our physical health. We also know there's these challenges, and then we get down to what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Well, we do have the capacity to maintain it, and we've gotten better and better ideas and understandings of what can be helpful for people. Now, to be honest, since this is mainly a group of women, I believe, and we're talking sort of sister circles, so I guess we're talking more about female sexuality a little. We do know that for men, we've got something like, I don't know, I forget the count exactly, but something like 42 products that are FDA approved for male sexual functioning. We've got 3 for women, and all 3 of them have offer very little help for women, very little help. So we can't turn to medications on this one. And, again, there may be a few things. Certainly, hormones make a difference. So recommendations are when we, enter menopause. And menopause, is, by the way, is defined as not having a menstrual period for 1 year, and they really clock it that way. If it 11 months and 20 days, you haven't had a period for 11 months and 20 days, and then you have one, they got to start the clock all over again. So it's a full year after you have your last menstrual period. Once you're in menopause, they recommend replacement hormones, and there are many bioidentical their bio identical hormones that they use for that purpose to kind of keep our hormones. So there isn't this sudden change. Now, over time, we usually wean ourselves off of hormones. So much older women, I'm 76, women my age aren't on hormones anymore. So, using replacement hormones stops being effective. But for many years that are aging, they really are and are recommended to be used. And they help with many things, but one of the things they help with is maintaining the lining of the uterus and so forth. But there are other things that help. There are other things that help. For instance, using our genitals, it's kind of a use it or lose it idea. We talk about sexuality. So if we stop being sexual, it can change many things about even our physiology that make it harder to get back to it. So we make recommendations that people maintain sexuality throughout. So that, for instance, having penetrative sex or using dildos, for instance, can help maintain the ability for our vaginas to be more elastic, to be somewhat healthier. The tissues are healthier, even helping to maintain lubrication to a certain extent. We can also use lubricants. There's lots of lubricants out there. You buy them in the drugstore and so forth. One of the best lubricants out there that's inexpensive, frankly, it smells good, it's easy to use, is coconut oil. Coconut oil, we make recommendations for women to use. Caution with coconut oil is if you use condoms, don't use coconut oil. Try another water-based kind of lubricant. But if you don't use condoms, it's a good one. So adding lubrication helps quite a bit. So hormones early on, lubrication is good. Utilizing, being sexual, continuing to be sexual, these things really make a difference. Couples often begin to kind of lose sexual desire. And that could come from one person's part or the other person's part, or both people, can have that happen. They're losing desire. We try to work with that in the sense that we don't really know how to help people get desire back exactly, but we can help them to have an interest in maintaining sexuality and have fun while they're doing it. So we sort of try to help them improve the ability to get aroused and improve the ability to be orgasmic. And these things help our desire, because if we're having fun when we have sex, maybe the next time around we want to do it again. And so, we have all kinds of ideas that we can help people maintain sexuality in that way. We've got professional people who can be helpful. Certainly having a good gynecologist who understands menopause, who understands aging, knows what to do about it from kind of this medical stance, making the recommendations for hormones or making the recommendations maybe for some other sorts of treatments and that could be utilized is very, very helpful. So we do in my field, we do sexual therapy. We do it with couples and we do it with individuals. And sexual therapy includes all kinds of things, but one of the major things we try to do is get couples to continue to be sexual, for instance. So if you're in a relationship, we try to help people continue to be sexual. So this means often scheduling sex on a regular basis. I always think about, often in programs that I do, we're the last people to present about sex. Well, don't wait till the end of the day to be sexual. This is a trick. Most of us, as we age, are too tired after a long day. We don't want to have sex. Are you kidding me? So what is more helpful is to figure out times where people have more energy, And so in looking at making schedules and making commitments to be sexual, we do things like that. Again, we can help people with ways to be sexual that might be more fulfilling, more satisfying, make recommendations to use toys, sexual toys, make recommendations for, again, lubrication, these kinds of things. So there's a number of things that we can do. The other thing that we have is a lot of women as they age experience pain with sex. They can experience pain with touching their genitals, the vulva, which includes like labia, even touching the clitoris, or it could involve the penetrative type of sex, insertion in the vagina. And we do have treatment for sexual pain. There are some medications that can be used. There are some surgeries that can be done. And we often make recommendations for pelvic floor physical therapy. And there's some wonderful physical therapists out there who do a terrific job of this that can help our patients with that. So between, gynecology, pelvic floor physical therapy, and then the people in my field of sexual therapy, we can often really help individuals and couples maintain sexuality in a positive way as they age. And lastly, I'm going to turn it back to Mike here. Lastly, it's important to have the right attitude, I guess. So we try to just talk about sex. We often talk quite openly and try to consider, especially as we're getting older, why are we even having sex? Beyond menopause, we're not having children, by the way. So why are we doing it? We're doing it because it's fun. If we're in a relationship, it's good. It's good for our relationship. It keeps a bonding going. And if we're doing self-sexuality, it's good for our self-esteem and how we see ourselves, in general. So there are many, many benefits to maintaining sexuality. Michael, give it over to you. Yeah, you're muted.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So my question for you from our audience, they want to know if that type of therapy is covered from through your insurance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good question. Let me say yes. I mean, for the most part, certainly most insurance will cover gynecology, that piece of it. Most insurance, if it's prescribed by a physician, your gynecologist, for pelvic floor physical therapy, it will be covered. If you're looking at sex therapy, which is more of a, psychotherapy kind of process, we sit and talk kind of thing. There are many, many providers that take insurance. So, and there are codings that you can use that will, allow the insurance companies to pay for it. So I think the answer overarchingly is yes.
Okay, that's the end of our next round. It's a yes, okay, so go ahead and call tomorrow. All right, and so my next question for you all is, for older adults who are single, what are some safe and healthy ways to explore dating and intimacy? So I know you speak more on the intimate side. So some safe ways. I know we had gotten out, so we might have missed some of that you had said, but could you share some safe ways that older adults, if they may be single, some ways they can engage in intimacy?
Right. Okay. Good questions. Yeah. Now, dating, of course, is complicated in this day and age. I will tell you that statistically, and this is all age groups, so it's not just young people. Statistically, most people meet through apps and online dating sites, right? There are numbers of them. There are some for senior singles seeking out partners. But then, those of us who are this age, older, remember a time when there were no apps and no internets and all of that kind of stuff. And, how in the world did we ever meet partners? So you go back to the sort of traditional ways, asking your friends, joining groups, going to church, whatever it might be, that you get yourself out there and meet people. But I will tell you, the vast majority of people, if you just look at the statistics, are meeting through apps and online. People figure out which apps to use based on, some of the data that helps us to feel a little more secure, but that there's no 100% guarantee that is safe, of course, to do. Although people often start out with their dating by, meeting in a public place for coffee, getting to know one another, and so forth. In terms of intimacy, and people have very different feelings about intimacy, like how, can you have sex on the first date? Is that appropriate? Well, I think the reality is it depends. It depends on you and your own values, your own moral code. You know, for some people that's perfectly acceptable. If they like the person, that they could do that. For others, they need to get to know them better. For everybody, though, embarking on a sexual, intimate relationship, things like to be aware that as we age, we are as prone to STIs or sexually transmitted infections as when we were younger. I mean, you know, and this is often something older people don't think about, younger people do. It's drilled into young people, you know, safe sex, safe sex, right? In older people, we say, well, you know, this is a problem, but it is, and we have seen increasing numbers of people as they age getting STIs. So from that standpoint, we want to take the same precautions, you know, for safe sex as anyone else. So, you know, safety comes in lots of ways. One is preventing sexually transmitted illnesses, of course. We don't have to worry about pregnancy, but we do have to worry about illness. But there are other safety issues, obviously, as well. And those are difficult in a sense. I mean, we don't have any absolute ways to make sure that the person you're with is safe to be with and all of that. I think at any age, we use our instincts and, you know, perhaps, like I said, some precautions, like getting to know somebody first, you doing it in a safe way. So, I mean, those are a couple of things about intimacy and safety that I can think of.
Now, my next question for you is, I had from the audience is, one person had a question about when it comes to intimacy with their partner, when they're not in the mood, and their partner wants to have sex and they don't, how should they go about it? Because they tend to get mad if they're not in the mood. So, should they go back to scheduling sex out?
Should they go back to, I couldn't understand the last part.
So, my question was, they had a question about, now their partner wanted to have sex, but they did not have sex, and when they told their partner no, they got upset. So should they schedule sex with them so they can discuss a good time when they're in the mood? How should they go about that? Because the partner tends to get mad when they're not in the mood.
Gotcha. Sure. And that's an interesting question, because the biggest single thing we see in sex therapy is what we sometimes call it desire discrepancy. In other words, one person wants to have sex and the other one doesn't, and there's a discrepancy between that. That's the biggest single issue we see. It actually is fairly easy to work with, as long as both people are willing to work on it, right? Because what we try to do is first of all, we want to improve communication so that the couple is communicating what are their needs and desires sexually. And then, you know, from that communication, we can make agreements. We can kind of negotiate. You know, for instance, if you have a person who wants to have sex 4 times a week, and you know what you could probably, what your interest is, you know, once a week at best, or once every other week. What can we do with that? You know, do we have to give in to the person who wants sex more frequently, or do we want to you know, break it, you know, go back to just doing it every other week and make the other person have the desire, and, you know, or can we help them to negotiate this and figure out a level of sexuality that would be good and healthy in their relationship? So communication is this huge factor with couples. And it sometimes it's hard to get to, especially if you have a long history of this happening. By the time they sometimes come to therapy, they're already angry at each other, and it's difficult to sit down and even have a conversation about it, you know, which is what you need to do. So that's one of the reasons we ask couples to schedule sex. And that is the #1 sex therapy technique, is scheduling. And then what we do with that is we make a commitment that we will have, let's say, I joke about this, but, you know, we don't want to do it at night. Remember I said late at night? That's the best. So what does seem to work is to have a, you know, let's just say morning or late morning. So something like 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. Good time. Okay, we're gonna have sex every Saturday morning or every other Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. Agree to that number, well, then it is our obligation in a way. We've committed. We've made a commitment, just like when you made a commitment to come tonight and you're here. You know, we do this all the time. We go to work, you know, when we're supposed to be at work, or you know, we get to church when we're supposed to go to church, or whatever it is. So we show up and we do that. You know, we have sex. If for some reason at that moment we, you know, it isn't, you know, maybe we've got a really bad headache, or you know, just not feeling very good, or you know, we can also do things like get a rain check. But we have to meet the rain check. We can't always give a rain check and then never meet it. So we're asking people to sort of step up to the plate. And if the other person who has a stronger desire actually has to, you know, they have to also negotiate, you know, so that we come to kind of a compromise position of something that's reasonable for both people. And like I said, most importantly is communication and trying to make it fun. So if you're having difficulty with your partner in something like that, where, you know, they're getting very angry because they want to have sex and you don't, and there's a blow up about it, I suggest you get some professional help. You know, that may be necessary, unless the two of you can, you know, sort of calm down, sit down, and make some agreements with one another.
Now, my next question to you is, now, someone wants to know, if you had, like they have the blue pill for men, do you have something like that for women? Now, I know of natural stuff like Mecca, our house to see if it makes you feel more sexual. Is that, would you recommend that to older adults other than taking like sexual enhancement drugs like the blue pill? Is that wrong?
Yeah, good question. This is the problem. You know, over the many years, the research on sexual enhancement for women have not been very good. There are two FDA-approved pills. Well, one's an injection, one's a pill for women. One is called Velisi, and it's the newer one. It's an injection, and probably is the other one's called Addie. They're both FDA-approved pills. However, they were normed on premenopausal women, not postmenopausal women. So their efficacy with postmenopausal women is unclear. They sometimes are prescribed, but they're not, even with young people, their efficacy is pretty poor. And you're hard pressed to find physicians who are willing to even prescribe them. So the problem is we just haven't gotten the blue pill. At one point, Addie was called the pink pill. You know, so coming down to an actual pill, we really don't have right now. There may be some things that help or enhance, but in terms of, like, testosterone has been implicated as being a sexual lubricant because higher levels of testosterone do increase our sexual drive. The problem is women taking testosterone, depending on levels at which you take it, can be problematic because it causes male changes like developing a beard and a low voice, you know, which most really cis women, you know, non-gender variant, you know, individuals don't want, you know. So, we haven't found the panacea, I will say.
Okay, so my last question was how? Oh, so hold on, a question from Don? Yes. So I'm going to give me 1 second.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay.
I mean, I know that's a quickie, right?
That's fine. Yeah, I understand. It's good to keep the time, you know, precise. It's good.
Yeah. Okay, I want to know can you give me I have a question from the audience. Can you give me a comparison of compassion with a companion, correct? No. Compassion with a companion. So you want to know a comparison with compassion with a companion. So like comparing like sex-wise. Yeah. So meaning the intimacy level as sexual, meaning just I don't want to just be a companion, intimacy with being a companion and someone just a friend with benefits type of thing. So with this question, now, which is question we're kind of asking is which one is safe? Which one is safe? Respect anybody's space. Okay, now, you want to know which one is safer as far as respecting somebody's space, as far as how you should deal with it? Yeah. So how should an older adult deal with a friend with benefits and separate from a companion?
Yeah, well, I mean, to a certain extent, that's probably a difference in how you're defining those. So when we, companionship is one aspect of a relationship that doesn't necessarily revolve around physical intimacy or sexuality, right? Doesn't necessarily. We can have a companion who we go to the movies with, we, go to the theater or go out for walks with, or whatever it might be. When we're talking about friends with benefits, just again, it's just terminology. The terminology does imply that these are folks that, in addition to feeling friendly towards, and we're not really in a deep relationship, but we certainly enjoy having some physical intimacy with them. So I think it's just a matter of semantics to a certain extent. You could certainly have a companion who you also occasionally have sex with. I mean, that certainly is within the realm. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think it's a matter of how you might define those different kinds of relationships. And relationships vary. Not all of them certainly are sexual by any means, and not all of them are companionship. Some of them are, we get together late at night and have sex, but we like each other. So I don't know.
Or we might not like each other.
We might not like each other. Either way.
I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
You have to know what you're comfortable with, and I think I agree with that. You have to decide what you're comfortable with. Do you want more of a companion or friends with benefits? And you have to decide what you're comfortable with, and to respect both parties and acknowledge what you want out of this relationship.
Right. Exactly. I think that's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
We have one more minute. So, Misha, you come up with that final thought, you and Dr. Thomas.
I
I've learned a lot.
Yeah, so, and the man, young and you are, and they want you to turn over this today.
Hold on, one second. You have 3 seconds to answer the question. So we have a 73-year-old older adult. She dealing with a younger partner. He wants her to lift up her leg, but she cannot. So what she about this? I told her to tell him to roll over to the side.
This meeting is being recorded.
Between oat milk and almond milk, which should I drink?
Neither. You go.
Like we're waiting for our host to get back in the main room. But in the meantime, Ariana has put a link in the chat for the evaluation. Ariana, can you post it again? Because I think if people returned after you sent it, they might not have accessed it, but we would greatly appreciate your feedback on the evaluation. Oh, you're back, Crystal. Let me turn that over to you then.
There you go. Oh, no, you're doing great. You're doing great, Sarah. It is very important for you to complete our survey. Hey, we were able to start talking about sex this year, and that was a new thing, and weight and other things. And we can only do that thanks to your feedback. So please click on the link and complete your survey. If you don't get a chance, we will share it with you via email. I'm going to turn this over to Roger Clark because we have 1 minute. Roger, do you want to give us a closing thought? And Sarah, cue up our closeout music,
You're
please.
mute. Roger, you're mute.
The closeout man is on mute. So, hey, folks,
Okay.
thanks so much for joining us this evening. I tell you what, I was invigorated after hearing a lot of the presentations over the last couple of days, and I really took away a lot of things that are, for me, are going to be very, very actionable. And so I want to just leave you with kind of thought that I left with you yesterday. And I think, one of the things that we have to do, and this came out clearly in all of what was said, is managing and balancing, the things that matter. And that is your lifestyle, your environment, your genetics, which you can learn about from your family history, because that plays an important part in how you manage that, and then how we manage stress. And we heard those themes over and over again throughout these presentations. So here's what I'll leave you with. Again, thank you so much. And as Reverend Williams told us yesterday, infinite hope, infinite positivity. So thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to your feedback and look forward to seeing you next year, and if not in between. And lastly, if you want to know about what we do as a Community Research Advisory Council, please, you have Crystal Evans, you have myself, Michael Thompson, some of the leaders on here. We will make sure that we have something here in the chat so that you can contact us. We would love to hear from you and love for you to sit in on some of our sessions. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great evening.